So hi, I'm Megan Schadlich. Welcome to the session, The Healing Library, Non-Traditional Lending in Response to Trauma. There we go. Here we go. I did start the recording. So thank you so much to SJSU for doing this, and most of all to all of you for being empathic and logging in today and sharing this incredible work that we're all trying to create from the heart. I'm the creator of the Healing Library. A little bit about me, creator of the Healing Library. I'm also the author of a book called Cooking Up Programs Teens and Tweens Will Love. I've been a public librarian for 3 very different sized libraries in 3 very different states all over the country for over a decade. And if you're a Twitter person, there's a little information. What we're going to cover today is sort of a crash course in the Healing Library. So we're going to go through an introduction of what it is, the contents of the kits, a little bit about social emotional learning and how the kits engage families in social emotional learning, and then how you can actually download them for free or purchase them and get started lending them in your community. So the quick introduction, and I am going to read my slides just in case there are any folks with visual impairments. So the Healing Library has been developed to start families on their unique journey of healing following periods of trauma or life-changing events. 4 kits have been developed to assist families with healing through social emotional learning while teaching parents the skills of looking critically at picture books and utilizing them to communicate with their children. So in essence, bibliotherapy. We have 4 topics that we've created so far. The first is Alzheimer's in your family. The second is the death of a pet. Third is the death of a loved one, and fourth is separation and divorce. Now, the crack team that I assembled to help me create these kits, it started as a grad school project when I was studying at Syracuse to get my MLIS. I involved Kirsten Cappy, who is the brilliant mind behind Curious City and I'm Your Neighbor books. If you aren't familiar, definitely check out her stuff. She has incredible giveaways of high quality, diverse picture books, as well as engagement guides for families or libraries. Bonnie Thomas, who is our licensed clinical social worker that ensures the work that we're creating and the language that we're using is as responsible and ethical as possible. And David Moorhead, who has since retired from the project, but was the children's librarian at the Lewiston Public Library in Maine. The contents of the kit. So if you actually open them up, here's what you're going to find inside. First is a guide for librarians that lays out what this kit is and what this kit is not. So it doesn't take the place of a therapist, it doesn't turn you into a therapist, but it will assist a family in starting a journey of healing following a life-changing event. In addition, there's suggestions for circulating, how to build the kit yourself if you decide to download the PDF and DIY it, and also recommendations, since part of the beauty of the kits is that families are able to keep any of the paper materials that they have particularly connected with to continue their healing journey, how to sort of restock the kit once it's been turned back into you. There's a guide for families, which is just sort of a 1-page, here's what you're holding in your hands, here's how to begin engaging with these materials. Next is an overall discussion guide for the tough topic. So this is going to break down for families healing language and constructive language that can be used following their trauma to facilitate engaging with one another, conversation, healing, and typically going through some stage of the grieving process. In addition, it's also going to outline things that you would want to avoid. So say you're not the kind of family that believes in heaven and your family pet has passed away. It's best not to say they went to heaven, because then you have to explain what heaven is to your child for the first time, and then you have to explain, well, here's why we don't go to church. And so it can just sort of open up a whole barrel of worms that you weren't intending to when you're really trying to smooth things over. And so the idea being that engaging with a child in the actual conversation of here's what death is and here's a sensitive way to talk to a child about that, instead of glossing it over, because that can tend to make problems for later. And then following that, we have healing activities. So these are activities that all of us design, but we really put Bonnie through the ringer when it comes to these. And she has an art and play-based therapy focus to the social work that she does. So we have all worked together to do these art and play-based activities, and they come with full instructions, but in addition, the kits are also stocked with all of the materials a family would need to engage in that activity on the spot. Our belief is that if a family is grieving, it's hard enough to go through that process on your own, let alone having to guide a child through it for their first time. The last thing you want to do is to have to, it's fine to go to the library, of course, and to ask for recommendations of books, but this kit puts all that together for you, as well as the activities. So say you were to borrow a book about healing activities, and actually, if that's something of interest to you, Bonnie Thomas has some fabulous titles that are really incredible for children all the way up through teenagers. But we also believed that you would want to ensure that the families have everything they could possibly need to engage on the spot. Oh, I see a private chat. I'm just gonna make sure that nothing's wrong. Oh, thanks, LFA, cool. All right, I'm gonna ignore that. So, oh, going back one. Acts of kindness. So this is similar to, or I'm sorry, it's not similar. It might seem similar to the activities guide, but the activities are more engaging individually as a child or even as a grown-up with this handling of grief through the art and play-based therapy activities. The acts of kindness are for when you've moved through some of your grief and you're sort of ready to combat what happened to your loved one, what happened to your animal, or how do I care for the people that also cared for my loved one. So a good example is if you have a loved one who was in a retirement community before they passed away, chances are that there are several people they engaged with on a daily or weekly or even monthly basis who were also affected and had their lives changed because of your loved one. And their passing, of course, is hurting you, but sort of expanding your thinking to understand who else is out there that maybe could use some affection at this time. Another good example is if you had a pet that passed away, and say you had a dog, creating some healthy treats that you could donate to a local humane society or shelter program. So sort of giving back to the overall greater community that is constantly engaging with the kind of grief that you have been working through. Next up, the community helpers. So this section we created because once the family has returned the kit to the library, there's still a lot more work to be done. We state in the kits that these are not a fix. They aren't going to erase what happened to your family, but they are going to set you up on a journey of healing and allow your family to engage in multiple forms of therapeutic activities. And so once the kit is returned, where do they go? And it's, you know, in the librarian guide, we write a little recommendation up about how to engage with the family in that follow-up reference interview once the kit has been returned. But this is a sheet that the family can keep for themselves. And it goes over, yes, community helpers. So you can see on the sheet here, school helpers, things like school guidance counselors, or even your child's teacher. These are people that can help your child through this. But also, these are people that should probably be informed that this tragedy has occurred to ensure that if your child is expressing some sort of behaviors that are out of the ordinary, those adults are prepared and ready to help your child deal with those things. Beyond that, it will have sort of broader national suggestions for like the ASPCA, how to get in touch with them, maybe oh, I'm getting ahead of myself, just so excited. So broader suggestions such as the ASPCA may also be listed, but this section, we really encourage our librarians to bolster and fill with their own local ephemera for the organizations that can continue to help these families as well. So let's pretend they were standing right in front of you. Whose brochures would you give them? What websites would you look up? So we've laid it out so that you can just slide these things into this family binder, or we've also created, or we've supplied you with the fonts that we used and our logos, and the actual Pantone color schemes that we used, so that if you really wanted to brand this out and make it match, you could create those materials to perfection as well. And then, of course, it wouldn't be complete without the books, right? So the team and I reviewed hundreds of books to determine what would go in each kit. And once we had these, we were so excited, but we realized that just because you can pass the right book to the right family, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to know how to engage with that book, first of all, but second of all, during their period of grief themselves, that they're going to have the foresight to say, what is it I should be gleaning from this? What I read something about this once. What was I supposed to do with a book and a child? Do I just read it cold? So each book actually comes with a discussion guide, and the discussions guides have discussion prompts. They also have observation prompts for things that you may be seeing take place in your child, but don't necessarily want to dive into yet, sort of like putting a little flag up for you to address later, or for you to mark some progress potentially in your child. And then finally, there are references back to the activities guide that we discussed before. So perhaps you're reading The Dead Bird by Margaret Weiss Brown for one of the death of a pet kit with your child. And in it, they have a service for the bird, and your child has resonated with this page, for example. It'll say something like, if your child has resonated with this page, refer back to the activities guide for gentle suggestions on how your family could have your own memorial service for your pet. So these are the books. You can see, I hope you can see. I know it's probably kind of tiny. It's a sort of, once I made it all on one slide, it was a little small, but it just goes to show you there are a lot of books available. We really were looking for, of course, diversity that is visible, but also when you're considering the grieving process, there is experiential diversity that is also very important to address. And so probably one of the easiest places to see this is in the Death of a Pet book selection. So you can see there are dogs, there's a cat, there are pocket pets, and there is one book with actual photographs used instead of illustrations. So we really wanted to give librarians the choice of how to reflect their community properly. And if anybody has a good recommendation for a reptile death book, please share it, because I didn't find anything I really liked. And then the one exception to this situation is our separation and divorce kit. We were actually approached by this publisher to create this kit around the book Here and There by Tamara Ellis Smith and Evelyn DeViti. And it was the first time anyone had ever approached us to do something like this. And, you know, being protective of our children and our communities and of picture books, and really, you know, being so heavily involved in the We Need Diverse Books movement, we weren't going to say yes to just anything. But when we read Tam's book, we just fell in love. The opportunity to show really caring characters, a mixed race family, positive influences from both homes, parents who seem to be working together, which we knew would be important for the parents who would potentially be borrowing this kit, and then opportunities for music therapy and environmental therapy. We knew we couldn't pass up the opportunity. So that is the only book that's listed in that kit, but as you can see, that's the only time we did that. Okay, so this is a big topic. Any one of these slides we're about to look at could easily be, you know, a half day or full day workshop. So I apologize if you feel like you're really getting the crash course. However, there are great resources out there. So again, I mentioned what these kits do is they supply families with an introduction to a healing plan of their own design. And that's through discussion, through sharing of stories, participating in therapeutic activities either together or on their own, and encouraging families to continue that healing journey once they've returned the kit within this larger community that we're introducing to them. It also allows your library to invest in the wellness of your community. What these kits will not do is, again, take the place of a therapist. They do not guarantee a fix for families, and they do not turn you into a therapist. So CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And I'm guessing that some of the people in this audience have probably heard of them. If not, the website is somewhere in these slides coming up. You can always dig a little deeper. And again, I'm going to read this just in case there are any visual impairments at the moment. And it's such a good definition. So they say social and emotional learning, or SEL, is the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. So within the SEL sort of umbrella, or that's a bad pie, they used a pie, they break it down into 5 categories: self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And that's the website I wanted to share with you, casel.org, and then you can go further into what dash is dash SEL if you want to know more. So around those 5 categories, you can see there are 3 blue rings. The first is classrooms. And so what CASEL really focuses on is getting students engaged in this kind of learning, this social emotional learning within the classroom. But then they want to see it outside of the classroom, sort of embraced by the school in general. And then their real goal, like, wouldn't it be great if beyond schools, we could have our homes, so the parents of these children engaging in these activities with their children, reinforcing it, but also our communities. So what are the community structures that play a role in this? And obviously libraries are a great fit there. So if you're a public librarian, you're probably in that outer ring. If you're a school librarian, you're somewhere in that school or classrooms ring, depending on what relationships you have with teachers and with your students, what allies you have within your organization. But then you might also be part of that larger ring too, if you're also working with your public library. So I have a much more detailed list of how the kits engage families in social emotional learning on our website, which I'll have a link for at the end. If you go to the grant language section, each of these has multiple bullet points, and we really wanted to make it easy for folks that are writing a micro grant to acquire a kit through purchasing it through the website, or if you're just looking to get the money to build your own kit, we wanted to make it as easy as possible for you. So these are literally just drag and drop terminology pieces that you can put into a grant or you can expand on. So first, in terms of self-management, one example of how the Healing Library can help is allowing for the recognition of emotions through those parent-led discussions in the overall topic discussion guide, but also in each of the individual book discussion guides. Regarding self-awareness, the kits allow opportunities for self-reflection while children and parents are sharing picture books or reading them individually on a deeper level with their parents, of course. In terms of social awareness, the kits provide opportunities to show thanks and kindness to a variety of community members through the Acts of Kindness guide. And these are actually the sort of opportunities to show thanks. That's terminology that comes from CASEL that we wove into our own language as well to really try and bridge that easily for librarians. For relationship skills, new emotional territory and language is created safely for families throughout all parts of the kit. And when it comes to responsible decision-making, the Community Helpers Guide focuses on local support systems to build a network of healers after the kit is returned that family can repeatedly visit or just get in contact with and ask questions. Okay, so as far as how to download and get started, again, we tried to make this super, super easy. So our website is thehealinglibraryus.com because that's where we're based, in the US. If you actually click, there are just a few tabs at the top, and if you click free downloads, this is what the page looks like. It says free downloads, and then each of those underlined areas are individual PDFs. And so the first one, the Healing Library, the death of a loved one. If you click on the death of a loved one, you automatically for free receive that PDF. A quick word of warning, some of these are like 70, 80, 100 pages long. So you might just want to make sure you have printer in the paper first, or paper in the printer first. But we don't collect any information from folks. We aren't really looking for anything other than to share this good work that we believe we've created. Once you've downloaded everything and you've printed it, or you're just looking at the PDF online, and you can sort of explore that kit and decide, this sounds like it would be so perfect for my classroom, or this sounds like it would be so perfect for my community because of X, Y, or Z that's happened recently. And this activity would be just the thing. So I mentioned that in the librarian guide, there are instructions for how to build out the kits. So you can actually just print that and sort of take a look through, decide what books, what activities you want, and it'll have literal shopping lists for you to create everything that you need. Once you've got all those materials, you'll go ahead and assemble them. Now, one of the things that I heard when we started this project, it was October of 2017, and we launched at the New England Library Association conference. And so many people were excited, but especially if you're from New England, you probably know there are a lot of really small libraries there and really rural libraries. So what I kept hearing is, this is great. We don't have the staff, literally the staff in the building, to leave a desk and go assemble something like this. So where are they for sale? And I was like, well, they aren't. We just, we wanted to give it away. And they said, that's great. Let me know when I can buy it somewhere. So after a lot of soul searching, we created kits available for sale. But again, a lot of creating this comes down to user-based design and really focusing on that diversity component. Who's going to be borrowing this? What kind of experiences have they gone through? How can we make their lives easier? And so I knew that if we were going to do this in true healing library fashion, we had to also think delicately about the libraries that would be lending these and their unique situations as well. So for example, we have 3 sizes available: small, medium, and large. The small is the clear plastic case that you can see there. It comes with a handle and some hinges. And that's really great because it doesn't have a lot inside it, but it can physically be shelved with your other materials, reducing barriers for your audience. They don't have to come up to the desk and say, her grandmother died, can you help us? They can just sort of come across this on their own, take a look, borrow things. The second size is an embroidered tote bag, and that has quite a bit more, well, a bit more inside it, but we also set this up so that any of the books that are going into these kits, libraries are choosing for themselves. And if you're interested in something like this, you can email me and I can go through a consultation with you to ensure that you're reaching a diverse set of experiences and population members that you may have in your community. I can give you some recommendations for what direction to go, and activity-wise as well. And then finally, we knew some people would want the whole enchilada, and so the whole thing fits into a rolling duffel bag size, or like a rolling suitcase if you're going to build this yourself. But that's just to sort of give you an idea for how big these are. And again, spatially, the case may work for some people. The tote bag is something that you can hang on a coat hook, and so that works for other people. The duffel bag is great if you've got, like, a shelf that you aren't using in a storage room. Ha ha ha, none of us have that. But it's there if you wanted to make the space, say. Once you've got your kit and you have all the components, then you're just going to add it to your catalog. If you And I get so many questions about this because people are like, so you list every piece out and say what it costs. And I'm like, I've worked at libraries that have done things that way. I've worked at libraries where compassion was the ultimate goal. And so it was, let's just say this is one item, and we already know that we want people to use the materials that are inside of this. We want people to take the handouts that are inside of this. If they're returning something that we have to refill, we've done our jobs well. We're reaching that audience. So it's really sort of up to you. But again, I would be happy to work with you on that if you needed specifics. Then you just start lending it. And actually, this slide's sort of all messed up because we're all going to do this a little bit differently. Some of us, I have been there in the past, would be so excited to get something like this that I would start lending it and then I would tell people about it later. That was probably, in 2006 when I started in libraries. Now, I would probably, while I was assembling, do number 7, and I would contact a bunch of different organizations who are also engaging with this kind of audience or are going to come across them, and I would let them know, hey, I have this thing. I'm about to launch this. I'd love to bring it by so you could see it and give you some pamphlets that maybe you could give out to people if they were interested in a resource like this. So they could come to the library or they could email me directly and reserve it. Then I would probably launch it. But always, no matter what you do, please share the news with us. The stories that people have been sharing about the impact that the kits are having in their communities are incredible. I have 2 favorites that I will share. I know someone is doing a talk about the value of sharing stories later. So I decided I would share 2 quick stories with you. The first is from Napa County, California. And a few years ago, you may remember that they had a terrible earthquake that hit. And shortly following that, there were some rampant and violent wildfires that spread through their area. And so they sort of had this double whammy. And I think as especially librarians, right? We all know what our paychecks are like. You think, oh, Napa County, fancy. They must be so wealthy. They must be so ready to deal with these things. But their library started carrying the kits, and they actually shaped them a little differently. And they focused some of the death of a loved one kits on specific family members, which I thought was pretty genius. So they found that you know, grief happens to all of us. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how much stability you think you have. It doesn't matter where you live. It's eventually going to touch all of us, and it touched their community in a deep way. And so they started lending these kits, and what they found was the response was so overwhelming that they now bought extras of the books that they lend in their own kits. And when the kit is out and someone comes in, they can actually cobble together the books to be sure that folks have the materials that are most meaningful to them. And they'll print on the spot for those families the materials that they want from the PDF, which I thought was incredible. And then I'm going to hold off on my next story, but please do share. The hashtag is there, and I'll have the resources at the end too if you wanted to email me or reach out through other social media. So if you decide to assemble your own kits, all I suggest is that you really keep that diversity piece in mind. So what is the makeup of your community? Yes, look at the data, but also consider the experiences that are going to be happening where you live. And really take that to heart, both when you're choosing the titles that you are going to include in your kits and the experiences that families are going to be able to engage with. Because if you print everything off and put it in the binder, of course, they can come back later and say, oh, and we saw, you know, In My Heart was on the list, but not in your kit. We think we liked the way that the guide sounded for that. Could we borrow that too? Hopefully that happens. But my point is that families are going to be able to see what you put in there. And so the more tailored to your own individual community it is, the better it will be received. And really focusing on that user-based design piece is key for that. So Bonnie, the licensed clinical social worker that we work with, when I asked her about what would you recommend to libraries that wanted to lend these in their communities, how long would you give a family? And she said, oh, well, how long does a book go out? And I said, you know, it's different. What if it's a new release? What if it's a summer learning book? So it's sort of all over the place. What do you think, Bonnie? And her recommendation was 4 weeks really would allow a family to experience the kit, dive in, get something out of it, but then revisit it and sort of have a truly deep experience and multiple opportunities to have these tough conversations in a very caring, loving way with support materials. However, she would say no less than 2 weeks, which, I mean, that's pretty on par for libraries, right? I thought it was great. So I'm gonna open this up for a few questions. I have just a couple minutes, but while we're doing that, I would love to know if there are specific topics that you wish there were a kit on. I will say that, you know, it started as a grad school project, but now I have to pay my team. So if you want to partner and, or if you have funding suggestions for grants that are out there that we could explore, please, please, please share them. I keep a running tally of every webinar, every speaking presentation. All the suggestions are kept in a spreadsheet. I'm gonna peek at the chat now, finally.
Well, while you're looking at that, one of the questions was, are these available in any other language than English?
Oh, that's such a good question. We want to translate into Spanish next. I've found the translator I want to use, but I have to pay her. So I have to either find a grant for that, and Spanish is what we're doing next. And then where I was living previously, we had one of the largest Somalian populations in the country. And I would love the opportunity to go back to that community and pay one of those community members to translate with me and do that as well.
One of Kimberly is concerned that these kits, it's a lot of work to catalog them, things don't come back. Is there any way to do this without a kit?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm trying to scroll in the chat to really see your question. Okay, is there a way to do it without a kit? Okay, yeah. So, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is, Kimberly, if you were to take a look at the actual PDFs and even just that librarian's guide that has everything laid out, that's something that you could easily give to a family. And I suppose, you know, if you wanted to, in my personal opinion, you know, no matter where I've worked, even though we all charge, you know, whatever, 10 cents or 25 cents a page to print things, I have totally gone rogue and printed these materials for families that I knew were grieving and not charged them. So it seems to me that that's just good librarianship. And so if you wanted to take a look at this, you could recommend these activities, you could give these pertinent pieces to that family. And my gut is telling me some of the books that we've recommended you'll already have on your shelves. And so you could send a family home with a really meaningful experience. Does that help, Kimberly?
While we're waiting for Kimberly's answer, oh, yeah, they said
Oh,
thanks,
cool.
yes. Is there a possibility of having an online version of these kits?
So who said that? I would love to know what you think that might be like.
That was Femeline.
Oh, Femeline. Online kits, curates, sites and stories available online. Link to HyperDocs or slides. Girl, that is a good idea. That is such a good idea. I will be totally honest. You saw how big the team is, and now David's not with us, so it's the three of us so far. And straight up, none of us are web developers. So I hope that if I could work with, I'm thinking if I could work with somebody else to create that, it would make more sense, because I'm not going to be great at doing that. Yeah, online would be great. Although, so what's been interesting too is we've had, I just checked the stats last month. Yeah, at the beginning of last month, our downloads hit 10,525, which was incredibly moving for me. I see my session's almost over, so I want to share this quickly. So it was incredibly moving for me. And because I know that it's not just librarians. I worked with a school in Missoula, Montana recently. Their school librarian and guidance counselor worked together to write a grant, and I helped them. And they actually won 3 kits. So I know that it's families as well, because I recommend these sites to folks, my friends that I see. My kid's uncle just committed suicide last week, and it was Christmas, and what do I, like, how do I do this with them? And so I'll send it to them. And so I know that it's not just libraries. And I think that this is a great start, but I love that idea. And actually, just quickly, the last story that I decided to share last minute, and I talked to the librarian and got permission. I'm gonna read this letter that was sent to me last night, actually, from that community in Montana. So Marla is the librarian. Dear Marla, this is from a mother who is just about to return their death of a pet kit. Thank you so much for letting our family use the Pet Death Healing Library this weekend. It has been tremendously helpful for all of us. We started with the books on Friday evening. I was worried about A because he hadn't cried yet. I read 2 of the books, crying intermittently throughout, and A asked if he could read the 3rd book. As he was reading, he teared up and finally allowed himself to really cry. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry. We all cried and held each other. He finally opened up and started to progress along the grief journey. The power of books. Saturday, we made the bracelets, 1 for each kiddo. B loves wearing hers, and A placed his on his backpacks. A's is purple like Maddie's collar. Today, we made a memory book, and I know this will mean a lot to A, and to us indefinitely. He designed it to be a book that when we have a memory we want to share, we write it in the book. Then when we're missing her, we can pick up the book and read through the memories that we've written over time. He put it on a windowsill, easy access for all of us, and we walk by it several times a day with a pen, so it's ready whenever we need it. Thank you so very much. I'll return the kit Monday. Best regards, Elle and our very grateful family. I know, oh my gosh, Simon, me too. So all that to say, of course, we want to improve this, but for now, it's out there, it's free. It seems to be working, and we just want to spread this as far as we possibly can. And if you have any questions or you want anything, moving forward, this is how, you're welcome. Yeah, this is how you can get a hold of everything. So go to the website for your free downloads. You can email me if you have questions at thehealinglibraryus@gmail.com. The company's library Twitter thing is Library Healing, and then we have a Facebook page as well. And Kelly, I'm pretty sure I have to wrap up my recording in like 30 seconds, but could I stay on to answer questions if people had them?
I'm not sure. For now, let's go ahead and do that. I'm not sure if
Okay.
this room's being used for another session.
Okay, so I'm gonna end the recording. Thanks, everybody.